What would you have done if you saw someone like Margaret sitting alone at that bus stop for days? Walk by, stop to help, or something in between? Share your thoughts below. Hit like if this story moved you, and tag someone who still believes in the power of kindness. An old homeless woman, forgotten and worn down by time, sat at a bus stop for days, and not a single person paid her any mind. A poor boy stopped, just out of compassion. No one expected that small act would go on to change his whole life. Are you ready to hear this story? Put on your headphones, pour yourself a good hot cup of coffee, and come along with me on a journey no one ever saw coming. She sat there, still as stone, on the edge of a splintered bench at the Houston South Side transit stop just off Highway 90. Wrapped in a tattered overcoat that once knew better winters, her frail frame barely shifted through sun, rain, and Texas wind. 3 days, 72 hours, 4,320 heartbeats, everyone unnoticed. She didn't ask for help, didn't cry, didn't even blink much. Folks walked past her like she was just another leftover from the past. Some looked twice, some looked away. One child asked, "Mom, is she all right?" The answer came without pause. "Keep walking, baby." She was white-haired, weather-worn, maybe in her mid-80s. Her shoes didn't match, her hands folded perfectly in her lap, as if she was still waiting for Sunday supper. Her eyes, cloudy yet restless, seemed to search for something only she could see. She wore a brooch, faded and chipped, in the shape of a lion's head. Old money, old royalty, or just plain forgotten. They called her crazy, homeless, ghost, but no one asked her name. For 3 long days the city of Houston forgot Margaret Whitmore, and then came a boy with a peanut tray and a heart too big for his 17 years. That's when the story changed. That's when the wheel started to turn on an old, rusty wheelbarrow that would carry her not just home, but back into memory, dignity, and destiny. If you'd asked anyone on the south side of Houston who Jerome Carter was, they'd likely shrug and say, "Oh, you mean Jay? The peanut kid?" He wasn't famous. He wasn't rich. But he was seen. Seen darting between the corner gas station and the fried chicken joint on McGowan. Seen shouting, "Sweet peanuts! Roasted, salty! Just $1 a bag!" Seen balancing a red tray on his head like it was some kind of crown, and maybe, in a way, it was. Jay Carter, just 17, wore worn-out sneakers 2 sizes too big, but his stride never faltered. Raised by a God-fearing mama named Miriam in a 2-bedroom duplex with a leaking roof and more prayers than paychecks, Jay learned early what it meant to make do. His daddy was long gone, walked out when Jay was still in Pampers, never looked back. But Jay, he kept looking forward. Monday morning, while chasing a $10 day, Jay noticed the old woman. Same bench, same coat, same stare. Tuesday, she was still there. Didn't touch the bottled water someone left by her side. Didn't shift her weight when pigeons pecked near her feet. Didn't seem to blink. Jay slowed down. He watched. For longer this time. He'd seen folks down on their luck before. Houston's no stranger to hard times. But this woman, she looked like she'd been carved out of some old church pew. Solid, silent, sorrowful. Like she belonged to something sacred that people had forgotten. That night he asked his mama, "Mama, there's this old lady sitting by the O'Connor bus stop. Ain't moved in 2 days. Miriam, busy dicing onions in a chipped porcelain bowl, didn't even lift her eyes. Probably crazy, or worse, possessed. Don't go touching on things God didn't assign you to." Jay hesitated. She said her name's Margaret. That got Mama's attention. She dropped the knife, looked straight at him. "You talked to her." Jay nodded. "You got close to her?" "Close enough." Miriam muttered a prayer under her breath. Jay Carter, listen to me. Don't let sympathy get you snatched. Crazy got disguises these days. You don't need no stranger spirit clinging to you. Jay just smiled that small sideways smile. She don't look crazy, Mama. She looks like somebody who used to matter. Wednesday evening, Jay made up his mind. Sold what was left in his tray, tucked his apron into his back pocket, and crossed the street to the fruit vendor near the Shell station. Uncle Mo, he asked, that rusty old wheelbarrow still sitting behind your stall? Mo grunted. If it's still got wheels, you can borrow it. He rolled the thing across the cracked pavement like it was a chariot, all rust and rattles. It squeaked like sin, but it rolled. When he stopped in front of her, she didn't even flinch. Jay cleared his throat. Evening, ma'am, he said gently. Your ride's here? She looked up slowly. Her eyes met his. Software lost. A little startled. Ride, she whispered. Jay grinned. Ain't no leather seats or seat warmers, but I promise I'll dodge every pothole and go easy on the brakes. And with that, he bent down, like a chauffeur opening a Cadillac door, and held her elbow as she stepped into the makeshift throne. What came next wasn't just a ride. It was a return to dignity, to memory, to the part of her life that hadn't faded with time. Down Texas Avenue they went, a boy in hand-me-downs pushing a queen in exile. No cameras, no parades, just one soul recognizing another, when the rest of the world forgot to look. It wasn't the smoothest ride. The wheel on the left wobbled like it had arthritis. The handles creaked louder than floorboards in a haunted house. And yet, to Margaret Whitmore, it felt like a limousine. Jay Carter, 17, 5'10", barely 140 pounds soaking wet, pushed with both hands and a whole lot of heart. Down curb after curb, past crosswalks that blinked yellow even when no cars passed. She sat quietly, her frail frame nestled in that rickety wheelbarrow, wrapped in an old fleece blanket he'd grabbed from his mama's porch. But her eyes, they weren't quiet at all. They scanned the streets, paused at mailboxes, studied doorways like a woman searching for a memory she wasn't sure was real. At one stoplight, Jay slowed. You seein' anything familiar yet, Miss Margaret? She didn't answer right away. Then softly, I remember a black gate with gold lions on the top, real shiny, like the kind you only see in movies. Jay chuckled. Houston don't have many castles, ma'am, but we'll look. Sorry, ma'am, he said, adjusting the angle. She smiled for the first time in what might have been years. That's okay. Feels good to feel something. They passed 2 grocery stores, 1 tire shop, and 3 churches. Margaret pointed suddenly. That street. Take that one. Something's tugging at me. Jay turned without question. They wheeled past manicured lawns, porch swings that hadn't swung in months, and houses bigger than hope. The kind of neighborhood where people locked their doors in the middle of the day, not because they feared crime, but because they feared truth. Then they saw it. A black iron gate, with gold lion heads staring like they were guarding secrets. Margaret's hand trembled as she lifted it. There, she whispered. That's home. That's mine. Jay stopped, his jaw slightly open. This is your house? He asked, eyes tracing the marble columns beyond the gate. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. He knew. He walked up, pressed the buzzer with the back of his hand, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to touch it. Who's there? Jay leaned forward. I brought Miss Margaret home. Silence. Then, click, the gate opened halfway. A uniformed man appeared, and when he laid eyes on the woman in the wheelbarrow, he stumbled back 2 full steps. Lord have mercy! Ma'am! The mansion erupted. A woman in silk ran out screaming, She's alive! A chef dropped a pan of biscuits. Somebody actually fainted. Jay just stood there, invisible amid the noise, still gripping the wheelbarrow handles. He watched them swarm her, kissing her hand, touching her shoulder like she was a holy relic. He watched them cry too loudly, ask too many questions, but he said nothing until one of the maids tried to take the wheelbarrow. That's when Margaret lifted her head and said, clear as daylight, "He stays." They quieted. Jay wheeled her through the gate, past manicured hedges and a marble fountain that spat water like it had something to prove. Inside, the foyer gleamed like a museum, white tile, gold trim, more chandeliers than the Grand Ole Opry. Jay looked around, lost in the shine. Margaret reached for his hand. "What's your name again?" "Jay Carter, ma'am." She nodded slowly. "Jay, you pushed me like a king pushes a queen." "Thank you," he whispered. "You're welcome, ma'am." She leaned closer. "Come back tomorrow. I'd like to give you something better than peanuts." Jay blinked. "A real job." The next morning, the sun rose slow over the rooftops of River Oaks. That kind of golden Texas light that makes everything look like a memory, even when it's happening now. Jay Carter stood at the mansion gate, shirt ironed with the back of a spoon, shoes polished with cooking oil, and a folded note from his mama stuffed in his pocket. He was 17, broke and unsure, but something deep in his bones told him he was right where he needed to be. He rang the bell twice. The gate buzzed and opened slower than molasses in winter. This time, it wasn't the butler who greeted him. It was a woman in heels too high for honesty and a dress too tight for decency. Her name was Lydia, Margaret's secretary, she said, from the office downtown, wherever that meant. She looked Jay over like a scuff on her new handbag. "You're early," she said, more insult than compliment. "Yes, ma'am," Jay replied, with that soft, respectful drawl only a Southern boy could make sound sincere. "Come on in, she's waitin'." Her tone made it sound more like a warning than a welcome. Margaret was seated on the back veranda, wrapped in a clean white shawl, sipping tea like a duchess. Her face had more life than it did the day before, more color in her cheeks, more certainty in her gaze. When she saw Jay, she smiled. "Right on time," she said. "You always this punctual?" "Yes, ma'am," Jay answered, standing straight as a fence post. "Good," she nodded. "Because starting today, you work for me." Jay blinked. "I do?" "You're my PA now. Personal assistant. You'll help me remember what I forget, schedule what I overlook, carry what I can't. And in return," she paused and took a slow sip. "Oh, I'll help you become the man God intended." Jay didn't know what to say. His hands fidgeted, his voice caught. "I don't know nothing about being no assistant." Margaret leaned forward, eyes twinkling with mischief. "That's all right. I don't know nothing about needin' one either. We'll learn together." By lunchtime, she had introduced him to the staff. "This is Jay Carter," she told them. "My right hand, and as of today, family." Some nodded politely. Some barely looked his way. One whispered behind his back, "Another street rat trying to play rich." Jay heard it, but he didn't flinch. That afternoon, Margaret gave him a small room in the back quarters with a clean bed, a fan that hummed like an old hymn, and a view of the garden. She handed him a folded envelope with a check inside, $500. "For your first 2 weeks," she said. Jay nearly dropped it. "For pushing a wheelbarrow." "For saving my life," she corrected. SFX. Thunder rolls faintly in the distance. Emotional strings begin to rise. But not everyone was happy. Lydia watched Jay like a snake sizing up its next meal. Later that week, she cornered him in the hallway. "If you ever find files," she whispered, "or see something valuable lying around, bring it to me. Some of us want to protect her. You understand?" Jay didn't reply, just nodded once and walked away. He knew a test when he saw one. Margaret from her window saw everything, That night, she wrote something in her journal. Day 1. He didn't run. He didn't steal. He didn't ask. He stayed. And in that moment, on that porch, under a sky full of Texas stars, a boy who sold peanuts became more than just a helper. He became the beginning of her second chance. Trust, they say, is a slow-growing thing, like pecan trees. It don't sprout just 'cause you watered it once. It takes storms, seasons, and a little watching in silence. That week, Margaret did a whole lot of watching. Jay Carter had been working in her house for just under 7 days, and already the walls were whispering. Some called him the Peanut Boy. Others, less kindly, called him the Stray. And Lydia? Lydia called him a threat, though never out loud. One afternoon, while Jay was tidying up the foyer, he noticed a manila folder sitting open on the parlor table. Legal documents, business titles, stock holdings. Not the kind of thing you leave lying around unless someone wants you to find them. He glanced left, glanced right. Then he closed the folder gently, like it was something sacred, and slipped it back in the drawer. Didn't take a single photo. Didn't pocket a single page. Didn't even breathe heavy. That night, Margaret wrote one line in her notebook. He saw it and left it. The next morning, Lydia showed up again, all perfume and purpose. She found Jay in the hallway and leaned in close. Too close. "Have you come across anything interesting?" she asked, voice like sugar melting on a bad tooth. "You know, papers, signatures, checks." Jay looked her dead in the eye. "No, ma'am, just dust and fingerprints." She smiled. The smile snakes must practice. "Well, let me know if that changes." Jay nodded, but inside he knew. This was a test, not from Lydia, from Margaret. Later that day, he found a money clip in the sitting room. Wad of bills thick enough to pay 2 months' rent. He picked it up, walked it straight to Margaret. "Ma'am," he said, "I believe this got misplaced." She didn't look surprised. Didn't even check to see if the money was still there. She just looked at him, long and still. "You ever think about keeping it?" she asked. Jay shrugged. "Temptation whispers, but I don't listen unless it speaks with God's voice." Margaret smiled faintly. "Good answer." That night she called her lawyer. The next day a man showed up with a stack of books and a syllabus. Jay blinked at him. "You lost, sir?" "No," the man smiled. "I'm your new tutor. You're starting law prep today." Jay turned to Margaret, eyes wide. "Ma'am, I didn't ask for this." "No," she said gently, "but you earned it." Jay sat down that afternoon with a notebook in one hand, a dictionary in the other, and more doubt in his chest than he'd admit out loud. But Margaret? She sat nearby with her tea and a knowing smile. "You're not just passing a test, son," she said. "You're becoming someone nobody can take for granted ever again." In that house filled with marble floors, silent judgment, and too many secrets, Jay Carter passed every test no one thought to give him credit for. He didn't just prove his loyalty, he proved his worth. And Margaret, once betrayed by blood and bound by memory, finally found something stronger than both. Character. Legacy don't start with a will. It don't live in land deeds or safety deposit boxes. It starts with a decision. A quiet, holy decision. To pass down not just what you have, but who you are. And that's exactly what Margaret Whitmore did. She didn't make a big speech, didn't stand at the top of a staircase like some soap opera matriarch with a martini in her hand. Number. She planted her legacy like a seed, right in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday. It began with a single sentence. "Jay, you're coming with me today. Bring a pen." Jay Carter blinked. "Yes, ma'am. Where are we going?" Margaret's lips curved. "To meet a few folks who forgot who I am, and I want them to remember." They pulled up to a building downtown with tinted windows and too much chrome. Inside was a conference room colder than a Baptist baptismal in January. Men in suits, women in heels, all stiff like mannequins. But their eyes flickered the moment Margaret walked in, and when she introduced Jay, "This is my assistant," she said. "Also my godson. Any deals that don't pass through him, don't pass through me." Jay stood stunned, holding her leather planner like it was the Constitution itself. After the meeting, Margaret turned to him in the car. "You looked like you belonged in that room, and one day you will." That afternoon, she handed him a set of keys. "To the BQ quarters," she said. "I had it cleaned and stocked for you. You'll need peace and quiet now that you're studying law." Jay held the keys like they weighed 1,000 pounds. "Ma'am, why are you doing all this?" Margaret didn't answer right away. She reached into her coat and pulled out a folded photo. It was her and her late husband, Arnold, standing in front of a microphone years ago, eyes full of fire, hearts full of purpose. "We built everything together," she whispered. "Brick by brick, phone line by phone line. But when Arnold passed, nobody asked what I needed. They just circled, like vultures, counting." Jay listened, quiet. She placed the photo in his hand. "I've watched you give more with nothing than they ever gave with plenty. You reminded me of who I was before the meetings, the marble, the mistrust. You reminded me of Arnold." Jay couldn't speak, but that didn't stop Margaret. "From now on, I want you at every board meeting. I want you beside me at every site visit. I want your name next to mine on the letterhead." He blinked, stunned. "I'm still studying, ma'am. And I'm still forgetting." "Between us, we make a whole brain," she grinned. Over the next few weeks, Margaret introduced him to donors, business partners, deans, and ministers. She told everyone who would listen, "This is my boy. He ain't mine by blood, but he's mine by choice. And I reckon that matters more." Jay started writing checks under her direction, donating to scholarship funds, libraries, youth centers across Houston. One morning, she handed him a folder labeled, "The Whitmore Foundation, Draft Charter." Jay ran his fingers over the embossed letters. "This is for me? This is for them," she said. "For every kid who ever sold peanuts with a dream in his back pocket. We're going to build futures, son." And just like that, legacy changed shape. It wasn't about Margaret's name etched on a granite wall. It was about what she saw in him and what she planted in the world through his hands. She didn't just leave behind a fortune. She passed down a fire. Every story with a legacy eventually draws vultures. They came on a Saturday, uninvited, but dressed like they belonged. Aunt Gloria with her Sunday pearls, Uncle Charles in a suit too tight for his ego, Cousin Tanya in 4-inch heels and a smile made of lies. They didn't bring flowers, didn't bring food. They brought paperwork. See, word had gotten out. Margaret Whitmore wasn't just getting older. She was making decisions. Dangerous ones, according to the family. Decisions like handing control of the Whitmore estate to some peanut-selling street boy. Decisions like changing her will without asking for permission, like she needed it. They barged into the front hall like bankers at a foreclosure. Lydia, the secretary, was already waiting, arms crossed, lips tight, eyes glinting with "I told you so." Margaret didn't flinch. She sat in the center of her parlor, high-backed chair like a throne, tea in hand, gaze steady. Jay stood just behind her, hands folded, trying to breathe slow and calm. Uncle Charles was first to raise his voice. "Margaret, we're family. We deserve to know why you're throwing everything away for a stranger who showed up with a wheelbarrow." Margaret sipped her tea, then set it down slow. "A stranger? That boy has shown me more dignity than any of you did when I buried Arnold." Aunt Gloria chimed in, her voice dripping pity. "You're confused, honey. That's the disease talking. He's taken advantage." Margaret stood, slowly. But when she did, the room quieted like a church after the last hymn. "You want confused?" she said. "Let's talk confused. I was confused when y'all stopped calling. When you sent spies into my house disguised as help. When you started circling my money before my body went cold." Her voice never broke. It cut. "I've watched y'all wait for me to forget my own name so you could claim it." Uncle Charles stepped forward. "You're making a mistake. He's not family." She looked at Jay, calm, steady, eyes wide, but never wavering. "No," she said. "He's not blood. But blood ain't never meant love. Not in this house. Jay Carter's my heir, my decision. And if you've got a problem with that, the gate swings both ways." Cousin Tanya gasped. "You're serious? You're handing it all over to a delivery boy?" "No," Margaret replied, voice soft but steel-lined. "I'm handing it over to a man with honor. A man who never stole, never lied, and never asked for more than kindness." Lydia hissed from the corner. "He manipulated you?" Margaret turned slowly. "You manipulated me. He loved me." The silence that followed was heavier than Texas heat in July. Margaret walked back to her chair, sat down, sighed. "There's the door," she said. "Use it." And they did, in pairs and threes, grumbling, accusing, crying crocodile tears as they slammed the gate behind them. But Jay, he didn't move, didn't blink, didn't speak, until Margaret looked up at him, eyes soft again. "You all right, son?" Jay's voice cracked. "Why me?" She smiled, tired but true. "Because when I was invisible, you saw me. When I was lost, you didn't run. And when you had every reason to walk away, you stayed." That night, Margaret rewrote her will. Official, final, undeniable. Jay Carter, successor. The Whitmore Foundation, his to build. Legacy, sealed, not in ink, but in integrity. And the Whitmore name? It didn't die with old money. It lived again, on the shoulders of a boy who once sold peanuts and gave a queen her crown back. The storm had passed, but the air still carried tension, like the way your bones ache after a cold front rolls through. The Whitmore mansion, once full of whispers and rehearsed concern, now stood still, like it was holding its breath. Jay Carter woke up the next morning in a bed that still didn't feel like his. He stared at the ceiling for a while, thinking about everything that had happened. The shouting, the tears, the finality of Margaret's words. "He's my heir." He should have felt victorious, triumphant. But truth is, he felt heavy. He'd been handed a kingdom, but kingdoms come with shadows, and the crown, it didn't sit easy. Downstairs, the staff moved quieter than usual. Some offered polite nods, others turned away entirely. Margaret, however, was unchanged. She sat on the sun porch with her tea, same way she always did. Only now, her voice had a calm certainty in it, like a woman who'd finally put the last puzzle piece down after years of being told it was missing. "Jay," she said as he approached, "you all right?" He nodded, lied, then sat beside her with a sigh that carried 17 years of worry. "Mama thinks I've been kidnapped," he said with a smirk. "She called the pastor, said I was being cultivated by cult money." Margaret chuckled so softly it barely stirred her teacup. "Well, I reckon we are cultivating you, but not into a cult, into a cause." That week, Margaret took Jay to meet every person who ever believed in her, from former business partners to ministers, teachers, and retired board members. She introduced him with pride every time. "This is Jay Carter," she'd say, "the future of the Whitmore Foundation. Not a helper, not a boy, not someone I took in. Number family." Some nodded with quiet respect. Some blinked with surprise. One man said, "Margaret, You sure? She replied. I've never been surer. But outside the gates, the world wasn't ready to be kind. The family sued, filed injunctions, ran rumors in the local paper. They called Jay a scam, a street rat in silk, said Margaret was senile, said she was coerced. But Margaret, she never flinched. She gave one statement, on camera no less, dressed in navy with pearls and poise. Let it be known, she said, that my decision was mine alone. I wasn't robbed. I wasn't fooled. I was restored. Jay Carter gave me back my voice when my own kin tried to bury it. The clip went viral, and suddenly the narrative changed. People didn't just see Jay as a lucky boy. They saw him as a man who showed up when no one else would. A man who lifted a woman, not for gain, but for grace. And Margaret, she started sleeping better. One night, Jay walked her out to the porch swing, the same one Arnold used to sit in with her, drinking sweet tea and talking about stock prices and Sunday sermons. As they rocked gently, she said, You ever wonder why it was you, Jay? He nodded. She placed a hand over his. Because you didn't need a resume to do what mattered. You needed a heart. And baby, yours came wrapped in patience and iron. Jay didn't reply. Didn't need to. In that moment, the storms had passed. The lawsuits, the lies, the legacy claims, they were still there, but they no longer owned the day. Because now, Grace had the final word. And Jay Carter, once a boy with nothing but a peanut tray and a prayer, was now the living proof that love writes better endings than blood ever could. Legacy, you see, isn't about marble plaques or gold-lettered stationery. It ain't how many buildings bear your name or how thick your last will is. Legacy is about what breathes after you stop, what grows long after you're gone, and who keeps planting in your name. And Margaret Whitmore? She didn't just leave a legacy. She became one. Jay Carter carried it, not in a briefcase or a bank account, but in the way he walked into rooms, shoulders square, voice steady, eyes kind. It started small. A ribbon cutting at a new youth library on Elgin Street, then a scholarship fund for first-generation college kids, then community gardens in Fifth Ward, and laptops for the GED Center off Southmore. Each time he showed up, people asked, "Who's this young man?" He always answered the same. I'm the son of Margaret Whitmore, maybe not by blood, but by choice and by grace. He wore that name like a badge, not for pride, for purpose. And Margaret? Though her memory faded faster with each season, her presence never did. She'd sit in her favorite chair on the front porch, rocking slow. Her hair pulled back neat, her voice softer now, but still sharp in the right places. Some days she'd forget where the sugar bowl was, but never Jay, never her son. Every morning he'd show up with news. Mama, today we got 3 more kids into college. Mama, they named a reading room after you. Mama, that old wheelbarrow? I had it polished and placed in the lobby of our headquarters. She'd nod slowly, a smile dancing at the corners of her lips. Good, she'd whisper. Always keep rolling forward. And he did. Jay turned the Whitmore Foundation into a force. Not loud, not flashy, but faithful. Reliable. Southern to its bones and righteous to its cause. At local events, Jay became Mr. Carter. At state conferences, he was Director Carter. To the youth he mentored, he was just Uncle Jay, a man who listened without rush and spoke like every word had weight. The mansion, once filled with cold marble and colder hearts, now echoed with laughter, late-night study sessions, and summer interns running through the halls like they belonged there, because they did. And in her twilight, Margaret saw it all. Not clearly, not always in order, but in feeling. She didn't remember the names of her cousins anymore, but she remembered Jay's cologne, the sound of his footsteps, The way he always brought her warm tea, not too sweet, just how she liked it. One summer day, Jay came home from a speaking engagement at UT Austin. He knelt beside her rocker and placed something in her lap. A certificate, honorary doctorate, in her name. Margaret held it with shaking hands. Her eyes watered, not because she understood it all, but because she could feel what it meant. A week later, she passed in her sleep. Peaceful, hair combed, hands folded, dressed in her Sunday best. At her funeral, they came from every corner of Houston. Politicians, pastors, peanut vendors, professors. People she'd fed, taught, mentored, and saved. Each one a seed she'd sown. Jay stood at the pulpit, not as a speaker, but as a son. "I am her legacy," he said, voice trembling but sure. "She believed in me before I knew how to believe in myself. And I'll spend the rest of my life making sure she is never forgotten." Legacy didn't end with Margaret's last breath. It lives in every book the child opens, every scholarship granted, every act of kindness done in quiet. Because sometimes all it takes is one wheelbarrow ride to carry someone back to dignity, forward to destiny. They buried Margaret Whitmore on a Tuesday. The sky that day was the kind of pale gray you only see in old photo albums. Not crying, not raging, just still, as if the whole world had paused to whisper goodbye. The service was held at Oak Lawn Baptist, same church where she and Arnold exchanged vows back in '62. Same stained glass windows, same wooden pews. Only now it was her casket they carried down that aisle. White oak, brass handles, a spray of bluebonnets and ivory roses across the top. Simple, Southern, full of grace, just like the woman inside. Jay Carter sat on the front row, hands folded, suit pressed so clean it looked like it still held its breath. He wasn't crying, not at that moment. His tears had already come, alone, in the still of night, when her rocker creaked one last time and didn't swing back. Behind him sat community leaders, foundation partners, college kids in caps and gowns, mamas with babies on their hips, and even a few folks who once called him nothing but a peanut boy. Funny how death rearranges titles. The preacher spoke kindly, called her a vessel of service. But the words that mattered most came later, when Jay stood up. He took a breath, steady, deep, then spoke the way she taught him, clear, low, and without apology. "I met Margaret Whitmore at a bus stop," he began. "She was sitting there, quiet as stone, forgotten by the world, but not by destiny." A pause. "I didn't push her because I knew who she was. I pushed her because it was right, because she looked like someone who had once mattered, and I wasn't going to let the world pretend she didn't anymore." The room held its breath. She called me her son before I believed I could be anybody's anything. She gave me a name, a roof, a reason, and a future. I didn't earn her legacy. I lived it. He looked out at the crowd. If you ever wonder what you can do to honor Margaret, feed a kid who didn't ask, hold the hand of someone who forgot their way, give without asking, trust without proof, and above all, see people, really see them. Jay stepped down, returned to the front pew, and took one last look at the casket. "Goodbye, Mama," he whispered. "I'll carry you everywhere I go." Later that evening, back at the mansion, the sun dipped behind the live oaks, casting long golden shadows across the veranda. Jay sat on the porch in her rocker, her shawl folded over the armrest, untouched. A little girl from the neighborhood, no more than 7, tiptoed up the stairs. "Mr. Jay," she asked, "was she your real mama?" He looked down at her and smiled, soft, tired, but true. "She was the realest mama I ever had." The child nodded, satisfied. Then she pointed at the old wheelbarrow, now freshly painted, polished, and placed by the front walk like a monument. "Is that how y'all met?" He nodded. She smiled. "That's a good story," she said. Jay smiled back, eyes misting. "It's just getting started." And in the quiet hush of twilight, where memory lingers longer than the light, Margaret Whitmore rested, not in silence, not in sadness, but in seeds planted, stories told, and a boy who became a man because someone believed he could. Here's what life taught me, sitting with Margaret's story still warm in my chest. It ain't blood that makes family. It's behavior. Jay Carter didn't have a fancy name, didn't come from money, didn't have a resume or a pedigree. But what he did have was character. When others turned away, he stopped. When she was invisible, he saw her. And when the world waited for her to fade, he held her hand and walked her home. In a world too quick to judge by background, by skin, by address. This story reminds us that grace still lives where kindness is planted. And sometimes the biggest legacies don't come from lawyers or last names. They come from a wheelbarrow, a whisper of dignity, and the courage to love someone who no one else would. So if you've ever felt too small to matter, remember Jay, and remember Margaret. Because love doesn't ask where you came from. It asks, will you stay? What would you have done if you saw someone like Margaret sitting alone at that bus stop for days? Walked by, stopped to help, or something in between? Share your thoughts below. Hit like if this story moved you, and tag someone who still believes in the power of kindness.